So today we're going to be testing out some active insulations and comparing them with some of the older insulations on the market. What insulation is right for you is kind of a hard decision to make. It varies by what activity that you're doing, and there's a lot of great information about these different technologies. So I'll let you each do your own research about what's best for you: down, treated down, active insulation versus traditional synthetic insulations. But we're going to test some of these and kind of get some better ideas about these products. These new active insulations have a scaffolding or a structure to them that allows a thinner face and back fabric to be used. So the idea is that they breathe better, they give off your humidity and perspiration better when we're really active in the woods, and thus creates more of a balance in our body temperature so that we're not overheating as much, we're not having to strip off jackets and put on jackets quite as often. So we'd like to test some of these technologies that are out there now against some of the older ones. So traditionally we have the down. We'll be testing a down garment. We'll also be testing a down treated garment called Quixdown is one that's out on the market now. We'll be comparing this with traditional synthetic garments. For our test we'll be using Primaloft Eco Gold that Patagonia tends to like to use a lot in their garments. We'll be testing a KUIU jacket that uses a Toray 3DE FX Plus in their garment, which claims to have good stretchability, but is also in this active insulation category that's supposed to breathe better and regulate temperatures better and stuff like that. Then there's Polartec Alpha out as well that has similar claims that does the same things. So we'll test a garment by Sitka that has a similar thing. We'll be doing some testing on the face fabrics as well. Most of the testing, we want to get an idea of what this insulation is doing in these garments. But just to help you with your purchasing decisions, we will be doing tests on the facing fabric. How loud is it? How compressible are these garments? So we'll do some of those tests for you to help you make a better decision about some of these things you might buy and might want to put into your outdoor setups. So next following, we'll just kind of go into some of the methods we use to test. We're only going to show you the methods on one garment. It would take far too long to show you the method as we test each and every one of these garments. So we'll show you on one garment, and then we'll come back at the end and just kind of show you the data that we collected from these garments to help you kind of compare and contrast and make a decision for again, what might fit your outdoor ensemble. So for our stretch test, we put down some orange marking electrical tape here, 12 inches, and what we're going to do is test how much this can stretch. As far as I can stretch it, we'll be taking two readings, one across the back and then one across the sleeve out here. So we'll go ahead and do this. I'm going to secure the ruler on one side at the tape, and we'll just grab the other side of the garment, and I'm going to stretch it as much as I physically can. And then we'll go ahead and reset that and try one more stretch. Alrighty, now we're going to go out to the arm and do the same measurement. Get my tape set up properly here. And double check everything. Beautiful. We're going to try that again. Time. Very good, and that will be how we do our stretch test. We'll then take those numbers and and compare it to the initial 12 inch and find a percent change between the 12 inches and where we were stretching it to across the back, and then across the sleeve, to give you guys an idea of what the ability of each garment to stretch. So we'll be doing several things for our sound testing on garments so we can get a good comparison there. For the first test, we're just going to take a standard paint stick, and we'll be measuring these with a decibel meter. And what we'll do is across 12 inches of the garment, we'll be running that paint stick from top to bottom. We'll do this several times to get several different readings, just to make sure we're not getting any erroneous readings, and then we'll be averaging those readings to get one reading to share with you guys for our paint stick test, just to kind of simulate, you know, walking through branches and brush and things like that. The next test that we'll be doing using the same decibel reader mounter is what I call the scrunch test, to give a little better idea of if any internal fabrics or anything make any noise while we're out hunting. But essentially the scrunch test, we're going to take the garment with the decibel meter, and we're just going to roll it into the tightest ball we can. Again, we'll do that several times and take the average of those readings. Hello everyone, forgive the close-up, but I wanted to show you a couple things here for this next test for our insulations. These active insulations claim that they're maintaining our body temperature over a greater range because they're breathing more and not containing as much moisture. So for this test, what we're going to do for our running test, we're going to start by just taking the ambient air temperature for each test to make sure that it's the same. And then on different days, I'm going to go to the gym, running on the same treadmill, same speeds, essentially do a 3-mile run at a speed of 7. We'll be doing a little quick warm-up for about 1/10 of a mile, and then a warm down for 1/10 of a mile. And at the beginning of that run, we're going to have a remote temperature gauge with meat probes hooked up to me on either side. Once those meat probes are in place, I'm going to take my temperature gauge. I'm going to put one in my pocket, and the other I'll set up on the treadmill, so at the beginning of the workout and then every mile I can actually take my temperature underneath the jacket. So under this little apparatus I have 2 probes, one on either side to measure heat. We're going to put our jacket on over the top of that. Zip it all the way up. Make sure it's cinched tightly at the bottom, so it kind of holds in heat, and cinched all the way up at the top. And again, then we'll do our running test and see how that goes. So for our wicking test, what we'll be doing is using this little setup here, where we'll be hanging the hem of the jacket down to the bottom of this tub here. We're going to then fill the tub up with a fixed amount of water, an inch or 2, and what we'll do is at set intervals we will be measuring how far up the jacket the water has wicked. This is important for several reasons in these undergarments. Usually when you're out in the woods, if it's raining or precipitating or really moist, you're going to be throwing something over these garments, a waterproof layer with usually some sort of membrane in it that's going to help with the water. But still, sometimes at the sleeve and hem you get exposure, and if the material is highly wicking, it will wick up the sleeves and things. So this will give us a good idea of that in terms of a measurement. At the same time, in terms of volume of water, it'd be a good idea to know how much water this is taking on, how much it needs to dry out. So before we do that, we'll be weighing each garment, and then at the end of that set time interval, we will weigh the garment again to get a mass of how much water has actually been taken up in the fabric itself. After which, we'll also then do a wicking dry test to see how long it takes for the water to dry out of that portion of the garment. using the same measurement by weighing the garment, we'll know when the garment has reached its initial weight within a certain amount of air, so we know how long it takes for that moisture to dry out. For our hanging dry time test, we will take each garment and we will submerge it in a bucket of water and leave it for 5 minutes to make sure it's completely saturated through. After which we'll take the garment out and shake dry it just to get a little excess moisture out. We'll then weigh the garment on a scale to get an estimation of the weight of the garment. This will be after taking an initial dry weight of the garment too. And what this will allow us to do is hang the garment and let it dry, and then at set intervals we'll come and we'll weigh the garment. And when the garment weighs the same, we'll know that all of the water is out of the garment, and we'll measure how long that takes then for the garment to dry completely through. All right, for our cooling test, what we're going to do is take each jacket, and I've just mounted 2 meat probes through a little styrofoam block to keep it off the fabric. As I fold this up, I'll show you this in a second. It's a remote meat probe, so we'll be able to read the readings on this unit here. Both meat probes have been tested in a glass of water and calibrated with another probe to make sure that they were all getting the same readings, and they all fluctuate within about 1 degree kind of back and forth in that cup of water just a little bit, but stabilize pretty close to each other. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take a heat pack. I'm going to heat this in the microwave for 3 1-minute intervals, and then knead it in between, just hand knead it in between each interval. And then after the 3rd interval, and after kneading it for 30 times, we'll take it and we'll flatten it out, and we'll place it over those probes. We'll then take the jacket and we'll zip it up and fold it like a package, folding each one the same way. We'll then flip it over, kind of make sure we got a little bit of loft in it. And I'll leave this till the temperature stabilizes. And our test took about 3 minutes for it to stabilize at its highest temperature, about 105, 106 degrees. Once that's happened, then we'll take this and we'll place it in a 0 degree freezer, and then we'll start a timer. And we'll just take temperatures in 5-minute increments. We'll do that for an hour so we can just kind of compare how these garments retain heat. So for our compression test, we're gonna take this Cuban fiber bag that's 17 inches by 8 inches. And we're just gonna compress each garment into that and then see how long it is. It'll be a fixed width in terms of the bulk of the bag. So let's go ahead and show you how we're gonna do this. And we'll just compress each garment into that Cuban fiber bag. And this will be somewhat subjective, but I'll do my best with each garment to compress it as much as I can into that bag. I've gotten pretty good at this, so hopefully it will be somewhat similar across the garments. I just compress out air and shake the garment down, and then we'll fold that up before the air is allowed to come back in. Down nice and tight. I can get a little more air out of that. Beautiful. So not a lot of air in there. I'll kind of, whatever's left, work the garment out to fill that space, like so. And then what we'll do is we'll come back in with my ruler, and we'll measure from the bottom of the roll to the end of the bag and get our measurement there. And that'll do it for our compression test. So for our next test, we're going to do a saturation test. Pretty straightforward. All I'm going to do is step into this shower with the cold water, and I'm going to time how long it takes for me to feel the saturation of the cold water running through the jacket. All right, here we go. All right, so let's start looking at some of these numbers. I'm really excited to get you guys some of these numbers. A lot of us look at these jackets, you know, we're looking at paying $150 all the way and up to $300 for some of these jackets, and we're wondering, are they really worth what they do? And we're going to take them out in the woods and really put them through the ringer, really thrash some of these items. Also keep in mind, these are all tests that I did, and like science, the more data we get, the more we can repeat these tests, the more we know that this kind of information is valid. So I've run most of these tests one time, so if anyone else runs similar tests, make sure and get that information out to the community so we can start compiling this and making sure we're just putting our dollars in the best place we can and making the best investment in this gear we can, so we can really just get out there and enjoy the woods. So for this first test here, we did our stretch test, and what this graph here is representing is our numbers on our stretch test. Remember, we measured out 12 inches and then we stretched the garment, and so this is showing our percent stretch in the garment, and here we have the 5 different garments. And so the blue area is the stretch in the length of the back, stretching from collar towards hem. And the second number is the stretch in the sleeve. As we can see, the KUIU Kenai pretty much wins out in terms of the ability to stretch. The only thing that came close was KUIU's Superdown Ultra. The sleeve stretching was very good. The back stretching not as much, but remember, this is a two-way stretch garment. So if I stretch the garment in the opposite direction on the back, we're going to get more stretch than the direction I did, but this kind of gives you the stretch in the two garments. The Kelvin Active didn't do too bad, and then our traditional garments with the nylon ripstop outer shell didn't have much stretch at all in them. So we can look across there, and hopefully this helps you a little bit. As we finish up looking at this chart too, I'm not going to say a whole lot about the individual garments. At the end, I'll kind of try to give a summary of all 5 of these garments and what the different numbers mean. So here's our sound test. Here's decibel levels on the left-hand side graph, starting at 40 decibels. Remember, 30 is a quiet whisper, and then moving up from there to see how our jackets performed. The first 2 bars in each column are the dry paint stick just scratching across the surface. We did that 5 times, took the max reading, which is the red, and the average reading, which is the blue. The next test is the scrunch test, where I balled it up, the green being the average reading on the decibel meter when I scrunched it up, and the purple being the max decibel reading that came out of it. We've thrown in a Filson wool jacket in here, wool being the kind of the classic quiet fabric we wear in the woods, and Filson was always just that classic jacket that we always loved. Man, that was a great jacket, but of course when they got wet, they stayed wet, and seemed to take on about a good couple pounds once they got wet. They were just really heavy. So in this reading, we can really look across and see how our Filson wool jacket is, and we can kind of compare other values to that. Really, our KUIU Kenai and our Sitka Kelvin in terms of how much noise they're making falling close with that Filson wool jacket. Of course, our other garments with the Toray fabric, and then the nylon and nylon ripstop type fabrics, they just are a bit louder. So keep in mind that these fabrics are good for containing the down. They're ripstop in a lot of senses, but they're just not quiet fabrics. So they really are meant for layering these other garments in terms of the additional noise they make in the woods. All right, bear with me on some of this next information because it's going to go over 3 different graphs here. The first one is just going to set up kind of the parameters during the experiment that we ran. So this graph is going to show room temperature blue before the experiment in Fahrenheit, red afterwards the room temperature, green is our initial body temperature before the run is started. So a lot of these are similar, or it's hard to tell the difference, but I'll go through this to note where I saw maybe some slight differences. But starting room temperature for the KUIU Kenai was 67, finished room temperature 68.5, Kelvin active 66, little cooler to start, but then by the end the room came back at the same temperature. The Superdown Ultra started a little warmer in the room at 69, and then 68 by the end of it. The Nano Puff jacket, the room was a little cooler for this one, 65.5, and then 67. And then the Down Sweater jacket, 66.5 and 67. So room temperatures for the Down Sweater jacket, the Kelvin Active, and the Kenai were pretty similar. Maybe a degree or so warmer for the Ultra, and a degree or degree and a half cooler for the Nano Puff jacket, which are also correlated in the initial body temperatures, all 90, 90.5, and 90 for the 3 we just mentioned with similar conditions. Superdown Ultra body temperature started at 91, and then the Nano Puff at 89. So there's error in our reading devices and stuff though, and we're talking a degree or so difference, so hard to really say for sure how much that impacted things, but worth keeping in mind as we look at some of the other information. So we're going to scroll down now, and this graph is actually going to show us our body temperature throughout the run after the first mile, the second mile, and the third mile. And forgive me, I'm going to correct that. It's not body temperature, it's temperature between the jacket and the wicking t-shirt underneath that. So this is not actually body temperature, but that temperature between the jacket and the body essentially. So we've got our degree readings over here, and then the 5 jackets. So let's look a little bit at performance between these jackets, because some seem to perform somewhat similarly. The KUIU Kenai started off a little on the warmer side compared to some of our cooler results here, but by the end had a body temperature of 90. 89.5 for the Kelvin Active, though the initial readings were a little bit cooler. Keep in mind the starting reading temperatures for the KUIU Kenai were 90, and for the Kelvin Active, I believe 89.5. So start and finish the same for the KUIU Kenai, 90 and 90. Start and finish the same. The Superdown Ultra saw a lot of body heating up on this one. Remember, these are not the active insulations that are claiming to keep us cooler as we're running. So I mean, the expectation was for these to keep us cooler during the run, and I just wanted to see if that held true when we actually ran the experiment. So a lot more body heat here. By the end, 97.5 really heating up, hard to run at this point at that high body temperature. If we scroll up, starting body temperature for the Ultra was 91 degrees. Keep in mind, this was the one where the room was a little bit warmer too. So did that equate for this change? Hard to say without further testing. I doubt it though, because it really was getting warm by the end. And by the end of the run, the room temperature was coming down to 68. So a lot of the other runs, the ending room temperature was 68.5, 68, 67. Not a huge difference. Coming back down to the Patagonia Nano Puff, this one seemed to perform very similarly to the active jackets, but also keep in mind that this was the one where the room temperature was a little cooler, so maybe that played into it a little bit as well. Starting body temperature 89, where finishing here was 90.5, so maybe that's of interest. It's hard to say. The down sweater definitely performing hotter, which is what I expected with the nylon, and then the 3 ounces of down in that jacket. So no surprises there. So then we go to the next chart where we actually weighed the amount of moisture left in the jacket after the run. Weighed the jackets before and after and took the difference in ounces. So here's 1 ounce of water, 0 ounces of water. Our winners here typically were the Kenai with a half an ounce of water, and the Patagonia Nano Puff with 0.45. Remember, room conditions were the coolest for this one, the warmest for the Superdown, again just by a degree or degree and a half. Then Kelvin Active came in really close behind with 0.65 ounces of water. The Superdown retained an ounce of water, a lot of water retained in this. And then the Patagonia Down Sweater jacket, 3/4 of an ounce were retained there. So again, we'll look at this more when we kind of compile our thoughts on some of these jackets and how they performed overall. The next test we did is going to be compiled of 2 graphs. The first is the distance water wicked up the garment. This was the test to just see how fast water, when introduced at the hem of the garment, would actually wick up into the garment. Interesting, the Sitka Kelvin Active really tended to draw water up into the garment the greatest distance. Keep this in mind as we look at the next chart in a second. The rest had varying degrees of wicking action, but as we look here, the leader of this group was probably the KUIU Superdown Ultra. Really didn't tend to wick much water up at all. The others kind of came in the middle here between the Nano Puff, the Down Sweater jacket, and the KUIU Kenai active insulation. So I'm going to scroll up to the next chart. Keep this in mind at how much this tended to wick up, how little this tended to wick up. And let's go up here and look at this chart. This chart here is our, hang on, let me move the camera a little bit. This chart here is showing us how many ounces of water the garment wicked up here, and then how long it took for that garment to dry out. So the one that tended to wick the most inches was this one here, our Sitka Kelvin Active, but tended to dry out in between 7 and 10 hours. The slowest dryer of the bunch was the KUIU Kenai. This guy really soaked up even more water, even though it didn't wick up as far in terms of the number of inches on the hem of the garment. And then also took 21 hours for this garment to dry out. Keep in mind, look at this legend down here. Initially we were going every hour, but once we reached 7 hours, we then switches over to 3 hours, then 4 hour increments. And then I did one more 1 hour increment when I thought the garment was just about dry at the end. But this really does stretch out to 21 hours and took a while for that Kenai jacket to really dry out. Coming back at the others, They took anywhere from 3 hours on up to 5-6 hours to dry out here. Interestingly, this Superdown Ultra, which hardly wicked up any water, dried out amazingly quickly. This is that Quixdown again, and I was really impressed with how little water this took up. Hardly soaked up any, didn't come up the garment much in terms of inches, and dried out really, really quickly. This graph here is going to show us the total dry time of our garments. When the garments were completely saturated with water, they were just hung and left to dry, and then in increments, their weight was measured to see when there was 0 water weight left in the garment. Just like in our wicking test, the KUIU Kenai seemed to take the longest to dry out. Again, this bar, just like our wicking test, this is in ounces over here, so it took on the most water and took the longest to dry out. The Sitka Kelvin Active followed not far behind, followed by the Nano Puff, the Patagonia Down Sweater, and then this is the KUIU Quixdown, which, just like the wicking test, really impressed with this garment around water. Just seems to not soak up a lot. You're able to squeeze a lot of the water out of the garment, and then tended to dry out really quickly. So this graph kind of mimics our wicking test graph and just confirms the drying times in each of these garments, as well as how much water uptake these garments take on, and how much is left after they're squeezed dry. So here's our cooling test here. This test is the one that I probably have the least confidence in out of all the tests I ran. I had to run this a number of times to get the temperature probes to work out appropriately and seem to be taking consistent readings. You can go back ultimately to how I did each test, ending up having to mount them in a foam block to get them elevated off the jacket. But even then, between the tests and rerunning the tests, I'm not hugely confident in these results, but I'm still going to show them to you guys, because again, the more data we can get out there and the more time we can run these tests will give us a little better idea what is going on. But essentially, this is showing us the garments, where they started when I put them in the freezer and where they ended an hour later. The Sitka Kelvin Active seemed in this test to lose heat the quickest and the most, but keep in mind here we're not that far below. You know, we're talking 4 degrees difference here at the final hour, which could be a big number or not. I think we need more testing here. The other garments all seem to kind of run in the bunch. Coming in all very closely at the end here. So I don't know that there's a lot of differences that we can make. The one I was a little surprised didn't perform better was the Patagonia Down Sweater jacket, which I believe comes with 3 ounces of down in that jacket, and seemed to just perform with the rest of the bunch. I thought it was gonna be up a little bit higher than the Nano Puff jacket with the Eco Gold Polar Fleece Eco Gold information. Primaloft Eco Gold insulation in there, and then the Superdown Ultra only has a couple ounces of the Quixdown in there. Their new jacket only has 1.8 ounces versus 2. They're really trying to go for a lightweight jacket here. I'm kind of glad I got the little bit heavier one with 2 ounces, and I'd love to see even one that they make with 2.5 or 3 ounces, because you're really not increasing your weight in the jacket that much, but you're really increasing the heat retention. Anyhow, this down sweater jacket, one explanation I may have for that is when I feel the jacket, it feels like most of the loft is in the sleeve and the shoulders and the chest. And when I feel the back of the garment, there really isn't as much down there. It feels a lot thinner. So this could explain why there's more down in here. But when I run the test, it's given off quicker, because don't forget I fold it like a package with the back facing up. So it could explain why it's running the same as the rest of the garments here. Our next set of data is our compression test. This test is how compressible the garments are for when we're throwing them in our pack, going backpacking, things of that nature. How much room is it going to take up in our pack? The KUIU Kenai was the least compressible of the bunch, coming in at 8.75 inches in a 8x17 dry bag. The most compressible was our KUIU Superdown Ultra. That was the Quixdown interior, and that thing really compressed down to about 4.75 inches, with the rest kind of falling in the middle a little bit there. The downs tend to be the most compressible out of all of them, as most of us probably know. The downs compressibility weight ratio to insulation really can't be beat. And here's our wetting test. Our wetting test was where I stood in the shower to see how soon I could feel the water coming through the jacket, seeping through the jacket. On that, the left-hand side, we have the number of seconds it took, and then of course we have the different jackets. The Sitka Kelvin Active felt like the water came through almost immediately. Just came through and saturated. So we'll talk about this more in our conclusions. The KUIU Kenai was behind that, but did tend to take a bit longer for that water saturation to come through that. Moving on to the others, it took a little bit more for the water to come through on those garments. The Nano Puff, though, on the back side did seem to come through a little sooner. And sorry if I didn't explain that. The blue is the time it took for the garment to feel the saturation coming through on the front of the garment, and then the red is the back of the garment, with the Patagonia Down Sweater jacket coming in next, and then the KUIU Superdown Ultra took the longest, seemed like, both sides for that water to come through, though the front sides were all very similar, coming in the same on the front side of the jackets, all coming in at 20 seconds, and the back sides were what tended to differ a little bit more. Hey all, I'm winding down my fall hunting season here. Did a lot of archery, some modern rifle, muzzle loading, packed into areas, sleeping in my hammock for a week, all the way on up to staying in nice plush wall tents and hunting out of those with my dad. Had a great time and a great season. Got a chance to use some of these jackets we'll talk about today. The only one that I haven't actually used under hunting conditions is the KUIU Kenai. But anyways, we're gonna take some of these numbers I have also gathered over the fall and put them together with some of my thoughts. A lot of these things that I'm gonna be talking about is comparing these jackets directly, the insulations in these jackets, because all of them are different and profess to do some different things. So anyways, let's kind of get right into it and talk about some of these jackets. First off, kind of some of the traditional jackets. The Patagonia Down is kind of a classic insulation that we like to use in the outdoors. It's very compressible for the warmth that it gives and the weight that it gives. So that's this jacket here, and I'm going to pull in another Patagonia jacket. Their Nano Puff that we talked about as well. And these two jackets are ones that traditionally I think would be great insulation layers for hunting. I say insulation because go back to our sound test, the outside's going to be very loud. I'll include the KUIU jacket here with the water treated down inside it as well. But now that this has come out, I'm pretty much gonna say this is gonna kind of replace these other jackets that I typically have used in the past and recommended in the past. But the way this KUIU really dries out, that if you're looking for a lightweight insulation layer, this and the pants are gonna come in right around a pound in weight. You can easily throw them into your pack. And pull them out when the mercury really tends to plummet and drop. So kind of that down sweater And the Nano Puff, I think are maybe not going to be your first choices, at least for hunting. For other outdoor endeavors, you're still going to find uses for these. If you're out snowshoeing, bird watching, you know, whatever it is that the outdoor brings for you, they still have good use. But if we're talking strictly hunting speaking, let's talk more about these other jackets that we tried out. Between the two active jackets, the KUIU Kenai and the Sitka Active. These jackets I was really excited to try because they really advertise that you can wear them for longer periods without shedding them, because they don't tend to retain moisture in them. And so you're not stripping them off as much. So let's talk a little bit about these. I want to bring back in that KUIU Quixdown jacket in a second and talk a little bit about that and some of the applications there. But in terms of these two jackets, during the running test, they really do what they say. They keep your body temperature down, keep it regulated. They shed more moisture than these other traditional jackets that I just talked about. So they are what I'd call more of an active jacket. Now the Sitka Kelvin Active, I actually got to use this hunting season. I really did enjoy it as a jacket. It does what it says. However, the face fabric is a little bit thin. I'd love eventually to get fabric samples from these companies, actually do some tests on them. But while this might be a good early season warm weather jacket, think of it more as an insulation piece as you get later in the season, or if you've really got to push through something, you're really going to want to be covering this up with a tougher soft shell. I typically ran this under a Jetstream jacket and really liked that combination. Having that Jetstream over the top with this underneath, and the Jetstream having the pit zips to air it out a little bit when I did get warm. Going to the KUIU, you can think of this one more as maybe a soft shell replacement in a sense, but maybe combining this with an outside waterproof layer. It does have the feel more of a soft shell jacket a little bit. It's got nice stretch to it that we saw in our test. It's dead quiet in terms of sound, coming down to more what your traditional Filson wool was. It's got a good pocket layout design. It's got the two zippered chest pockets and the two lower zippered pockets. Where the Sitka Kelvin Active has one zippered chest pocket and then two hand pockets that aren't zippered on it. The KUIU Active also has pit zips to help increase your cooling off, where the Kelvin Active doesn't have pit zips. So think of the Kelvin Active again as a warm, cool weather piece. And then an insulation layer that you're going to throw on under something. If you're looking for more of a soft shell replacement, think of this KUIU Kelvin Active if that's what you're looking for in your gear lineup. Now, that being said, on both of these items, if you're wearing them as an outer shell, you're going to be wearing them more in warmer weathers, not wet precipitation conditions. In all of our tests, these jackets really did tend to take up water quickly and took a while to dry out, especially in the case of this KUIU Kenai jacket. Once it was wet, it stayed wet and took a long time to really dry out. So you're really going to have to think about layering this with a membrane, some sort of waterproof membrane over the top of it. So in terms of what I'm thinking about running this year and experimenting with, I think for my my day hunts and stuff like that, I'm going to think about running what I did during this season. I did this 3 times, but run the Kelvin Active underneath my Jetstream jacket. And then also I carry a waterproof layer over the top of that as well. So if the rain starts coming down, I can either put that over the Sitka Kelvin, or if it's cooler, I can throw that over the Jetstream as well when the mercury drops, to kind of cover me a little bit more. The other thing that I'll probably run with that just in my pack is I'm really, again, impressed with this Quixdown. It's loud, so again, this isn't going to be your outer jacket for hunting. This is going to be when the mercury drops, you need to layer up. But running this with that Jetstream, and then in my pack carrying this in the pant for a pound, really does allow me to layer up and cover almost any hunting condition. Gets really versatile there, other than maybe the coldest conditions. But KUIU also does make a Superdown Pro jacket versus their Ultra, which has more of that Quixdown in it. It's a little bit heavier, but still I believe only at like 13-14 ounces. That can really cover you too if you're going to be hunting in colder conditions. Now, the other thing I'm going to be testing out this year, I really want to try this KUIU Kenai jacket. My thoughts on this one are more in my backpacking situations when I really want to shed weight. I'm going to try using this to replace my soft shell completely, using probably a Sitka core lightweight hoodie underneath this as a wicking layer. I like that because it has the hood, and the Sitka also has the face mask built in. Over that hood, I can always throw my Jetstream hat over the top of it when the mercury drops. But then on top of this, the idea of getting rid of that soft shell layer, now that they're coming out with quieter and quieter rain gear, something I'd like to test in a future video. But in terms of this year, till I get to that, I'd like to try out Sitka's Thunderhead rain system. I have that now. I haven't used it yet, but it seems really quiet in terms of the face fabric. Again, I'd like to try it out a little bit, do some tests on it to see exactly how quiet it is compared to other things. But running that potentially over the top of this, and then still carrying a good down layer as another insulation layer when I need it, a good lightweight insulation layer, maybe even that KUIU Superdown Pro. But I think that might be a good way to really get the ounces down by cutting that soft shell jacket and just using this as my soft shell, using it as an insulation layer all in one. Being able to throw the rain layer over the top when it rains, or if the mercury plummets, throw on that down layer with the rain layer over the top of it as well. A lot of people are saying that KUIU's Yukon is a nice quiet layer as well in terms of rain gear. I haven't got my hands on it, but again, I'd love to eventually get that. And the Thunderhead, some of these other quiet ones, reached out to some other companies, see if they'll respond, and do some sound tests on those and see where those sound tests are coming back. So that kind of covers some of the hunting applications I think we're getting as these come back. To kind of summarize, keep in mind that these are good active layers, but they're not going to be your rainproof layer. You really want to keep these dry, things like that. If you need more information for your personal situations, again, we did tests on compressibility, how well these will fit in your pack, sound tests, so you can kind of compare them to see what they'll work for your situation. We did the body heat tests to see how well these actually shed moisture, allowed perspiration to pass through, and maintain body heat when we're pushing ourselves, unlike some of the traditional down layers and stuff that really elevate our body heat. So I hope this all helps. I hope you find it useful. Please give me feedback, or if you find any of doing your own tests, you can add to this information, so that again we can all just make really good decisions about our outdoor gear and ultimately just enjoy our time in the woods. So thank you for joining me, and have a wonderful day.